In this video, we're going to resurrect this badly damaged Google Pixel 6a that was saved from e-waste in a previous video. In that video, the phone was tested and found to be charging despite its condition. So I purchased a new display for 150 Australian dollars as the original one was obliterated. But despite being electronically functioning, if I was to replace all the cosmetically damaged parts, I'd spend more than the whole phone's worth. Which creates a dilemma faced by many material items, where repair is more than the item's value. I could just send this phone back to e-waste to be shredded, but I want to try something new. Replacing parts is easy, but what about repairing the chipped frame and damaged back? Is it possible? What can be done to create a functional yet cosmetically decent phone when the resale value of this phone in Australia is under $250? Of course, if I was to save this phone at all, there was no avoiding the cost of the display, but I feel it's uneconomical to spend a further $85 to $100 on a new frame. Having temporarily attached the new display, we can see this Pixel's motherboard is still working. One of the issues on any color anodized aluminium is that scratches will show the base color of the raw aluminium. This phone is by far an extreme example, but to improve its look, I plan to remove all the black anodizing to bring it back to aluminium, which will transform this black Pixel into a silver version. I did also consider painting it with an oil-based metal paint, however there's a chance it would scratch off. For this, I'll be using a stone grinding attachment on a rotary tool to grind the material away. To make this process easier, I attempted to remove the power and volume buttons. This would prevent the need to work around them when grinding. However, not only was the button assembly not coming free, it looked as though I'd need to disassemble most of the phone to get it out anyway. So I scrapped that idea and decided to just work around them. Firing up the rotary tool, I can begin grinding away the anodized material. I'm wearing both eye protection and a mask throughout this process as it smells pretty bad. I was unsure how the antenna bars would cope as they're made from plastic, but thankfully they aren't damaged by this process. The anodized coating is removing with relative ease, however the surface below is left quite coarse and uneven. So we'll definitely have to find a way to take care of that. But sometimes things have to look worse before they look better. Let's just hope that's the case here. The first stage of this process is done. There's no more black coating, but the frame is now sharp to the touch and looks like we've taken a grinder to it. I found this sanding block in the kit that I thought might help even it out. While it took off the sharp burrs, it didn't improve the look. So it was time to bust out the polishing kit to see if that would improve things. Surely it'll buff out, right? It's certainly a lot shinier, but the frame is still pitted. We're on the right track, but it's not abrasive enough, so it's time to bust out the sandpaper. Those included were about 40 grit, substantially too coarse for what we want. I settled on 1200 grit, which took out all the grinding marks and even some of the previous damage. Doing this process mechanically would be preferred. However, I only had standard sheets, so it was extra arm work for me. After a polish, the result is far more impressive. We went from this to this. So it's time to repeat this process for the remaining sides. It was quite the challenge to work around the buttons. For this reason, I've chosen not to remove the anodizing in the recess between the buttons, as this would be far too difficult to access with the grinder and sandpaper. This means the buttons will appear as one large bar rather than two individual buttons. I would also avoid the plastic buttons with the polishing wheel, as they may melt, resulting in the wheel taking material off. I did quickly run over the top of these buttons a few times before thinking otherwise. After a good polish, the phone is scrubbing up well. With such a success with the frame and my confidence high, I decided to continue with the plastic back panel, but this would be my undoing. The plastic wasn't polishing up, so I increased the speed, which almost simultaneously melted the plastic, causing the pad to dig in. Having ruined all hope of using this back panel anyway, I decided to experiment with sandpaper and plastic polish. The improvement was minor and not worth the effort when a replacement is only $7, so that's the route we'll take. Having created quite the mess, it's time to clean things up before we get the new back panel and display installed. But let's just take a moment to admire the frame. While some of the deeper dents have persisted, the frame is looking significantly better than it did before, even if it doesn't look brand new. I'll give the phone a clean to remove any of the dust as a result of the framework, as well as repaste the heatsink. It's now over to the heat plate where the back panel can have its adhesive softened. The adhesive holding this back panel in place is incredibly strong, requiring several rounds on the heat plate and some forceful prying before it began to let go. Once a point of entry was established, a pick makes easy work of separating the rest of the adhesive. But before we get too excited, there's an NFC antenna stuck to this piece. Tearing this piece off will damage the NFC antenna, so care needs to be taken to separate it from the back. Using a jimmy tool and some alcohol, it can be loosened. Next, the decorative plastic camera surround can be removed. It's attached with the same strong adhesive as the previous piece. Once loose, it can be peeled off. Any residual adhesive left behind removed before the new parts are installed. First on is the new decorative camera surround, then the back panel. I'll add a little liquid adhesive to the NFC antenna to prevent the old adhesive on it from partially sticking, which would result in an annoying clicking sound every time the back panel would be pressed. Adding a small amount of fresh adhesive will prevent this. Once the back panel is firmly pressed into position, it's time for the display to be installed. So it's out with the old adhesive and in with the new. Once the protective films are removed, the display can be attached and secured with its bracket. Finally, the display can be firmly pressed into place, and the plastic protective film can be removed from our new components. And we're done. So this is it, a resurrected Google Pixel 6a. It's far from a perfect example, but I think for a phone that was pulled out of e-waste, it has come up okay, considering we tried repairing it with as few new components as possible. I had hoped the back would have polished up, but that just wasn't the case, so it had to be replaced. The screen was also something that had to be swapped out. However, sourcing a used one may have helped reduce costs. The frame was by far the real experiment. It now looks like a Google Pixel 6 Pro, as all the Pixel 6a models shipped with black frames. If you're looking to test a device like this one after repair or before sale, test it with iTest. My phone testing application is available for both iOS and Android. iTest gives you the ability to test many hardware functions, including those not typically easy to test without the aid of such an application, including the sensors, NFC, and color and burn-in. The Android version also allows for testing of spoofed hardware info, typical on cheap imports, along with voice over LTE compatibility to prepare for 3G and 2G shutdowns around the globe. For most common phones, the replacement frame is far cheaper than one for this model and is a much better option that will leave you with a better finish. But I enjoyed this experiment nonetheless. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffreys video. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing and check out the phone restoration playlist for more videos just like this one. And if you're looking for any used devices, be sure to check out my online store, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.